They said Silas Kane was no longer a man, just a shadow with a rifle, living on the bones of a past that never stopped bleeding. He hadn't spoken to a soul in months, hadn't needed to, not when the world had already taken everything that spoke back. But the trap he set today wasn't holding a coyote. It was holding fate. And fate was breathing. The sun bore down like a branding iron, searing the ridge above Kane's land. Not a ranch, not really, just wood, wire, and memory stitched together by a man too stubborn to bury himself beside the wife and son he'd already put in the ground. Silas Kane moved with the kind of stillness earned by men who'd seen enough killing to know noise was an invitation. He checked the snare lines every afternoon. Routine kept the ghosts quiet. Coyotes, rustlers, strays. It didn't matter what got caught. What mattered was control. But today, something was wrong. The rope was pulled tight across the mesquite, a strain in the branch that didn't hum like usual. There was a sound, wet, ragged, not the snarl of an animal, a gasp, human. He stepped forward, boot scuffing the dry dirt. And there she was. Tangled in his own net, half suspended, was a woman. Apache. Her skin was scratched raw across the thigh and shoulder where the rope had dug in. Her deerskin dress was torn at the chest, and her fingers, bloodied, trembling, clutched the fabric against her with all the dignity she had left. Her eyes locked onto him, wild, furious, not begging. He drew his skinning knife, not the rifle, never the rifle, and crouched. She flinched hard, her voice like gravel. "Don't touch me." Silas didn't move, didn't blink. He understood. She thought he'd set the trap for her. Not to catch something wild, but to use something helpless. "You pull again, you'll tear your shoulder," he said, voice low, flat. She spat through her fear. "Better that than your hands on me." It cut him sharper than any blade, but he didn't speak, just moved slow, deliberate, knife slicing clean through the net's bindings one by one. When the last rope gave, she crumpled hard, knees to dirt, tried to stand. The leg buckled. He caught her under the arms. She twisted like a wildcat, terrified. Her voice was a breath. "Let me go. You stand, you'll fall again," he said, calm as stone. "You'll bleed out before the sun sets. Coyotes will be on you by night." She stared at him, chest rising, heart torn between fight and collapse. "What do you want?" she hissed. "What do you want, Silas?" He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, let truth show. "I want you to stay alive." Her breath hitched, confusion, suspicion, but her body gave out before her mind could. Her knees folded, and he caught her again, this time without resistance. She was light but stiff, like wood bracing for the axe. Her head touched his shoulder just for a moment. She shuddered like even that cost her something sacred. He carried her toward the cabin. No words, no looks, just the crunch of boots over dry ground and a silence so wide it could bury regret. The cabin came into view. Bleached walls, a single cot inside, one saddle on the rail, no second cup. Inside, the air was cool. He laid her down, careful not to jostle the wound. She looked at the cot like it didn't belong in a man's home. Too clean. Too kind. "If you try anything," she rasped. He didn't answer. He dipped a cloth in water and held it out. "You're hurt. That's all I'm here to fix." She didn't move, but she didn't pull back when the cold cloth touched her skin. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. Pride wouldn't let her. "Men pretend kindness," she whispered. "I'm not pretending." He pulled the blanket up to her collarbone, covering the tear in her dress. She noticed. Her lips trembled, but no words came. Sleep took her like the wind takes fire, slow, then all at once. "Tala," she breathed before her eyes shut. Silas sat beside her, hat in his lap, hands still. He didn't say her name back. Not yet. Just watched her breathe, shallow but steady. And for the first time in too many years, he felt the silence shift. Not softer, but less empty. He didn't know if the trap had caught a burden or a purpose. He only knew he wasn't letting her die in it. Not tonight. If this moment moved you, hit that subscribe button and stay for what comes next. This ain't the last storm Silas Kane's gonna face. The fire had burned down to its glowing bones. The night wrapped tight around the cabin, and inside, silence pressed like a second skin. Silas Kane sat by the cot, his elbows resting on his knees, rifle leaning against the wall. He hadn't moved in hours, not because he was tired, but because stillness had long been his shield. The woman, Tala, slept fitfully, her breath light, but no longer trembling. That was something. But nothing ever stayed still for long. She startled awake, her breath hitched, and in the half-light her eyes went wide, sharp with memory, her hand clutched at the blanket. Silas didn't move. Just looked at her the way you look at a rattler. Not with fear, but with respect. "Don't touch me," she rasped. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut. It wasn't just fear. It was a command, honed from too many times not being heard. She thought the worst had come. He answered without standing. "Not unless you ask me to." He reached for his knife, not to threaten, but to begin cutting the remnants of the snare still tangled around her leg. His movement was slow, clear, careful. No sudden noise, no shadow tricks. But the moment that blade glinted in the firelight, her body snapped like a wire under tension. "No," she cried, trying to drag herself back, shoulders scraping the cot's edge. Silas held the knife away, open-palmed. "I ain't here to harm you." She didn't hear that. Not yet. Her body was locked in a battle between fight and collapse. She was no stranger to being cornered. Her muscles braced, her eyes wild like a mare caught in barbed wire. Silas spoke low, steady. "You're bleeding under that rope. If I don't cut it off, it'll rot where it sits." She glared at him through the tangle of hair and fear. "That what you told the last one?" He didn't flinch. There was no last one. The silence between them grew teeth. Eventually her jaw twitched. She nodded once, not in trust, but in surrender to logic. He moved in, slow as a man approaching a wounded animal. No sudden gestures. His hand worked the knife under the twisted strand, biting into her skin. With each slice, she flinched, but she didn't pull away. The last of the rope came free. Her leg trembled and dropped limp to the cot. Silas rose, backing up to the stove. He poured water into a bowl, dropped a cloth in, and set it near her. No orders, no reach. "You clean it if you'd rather. I'll step out." Her voice came softer this time, almost reluctant. "Why are you like this?" He paused with his hand on the door. "Like what?" "Careful, kind, like I'm not already broken." He didn't answer right away. Then, "'Cause I ain't interested in owning what don't belong to me." Tala blinked. That wasn't a sentence she'd heard before. He stepped out into the cold. By the time he came back, she was sitting up. Barely, but proud. The cloth was pink with blood. The wound was cleaned. Her chin was high. She looked like hell. She also looked alive. Silas brought her food, just bread and beans, but warm, and set it by the cot. "I ain't hungry," she said. "Eat anyway." I said, "You'll pass out again if you don't." You want to leave, you'll need strength. That gave her pause. She picked at the bread, then took a bite. It hurt to chew. She didn't stop. He sat back down across the room, not watching her eat, but just being there, like a post stuck deep into the dirt, unmoving, steady. She looked up, voice rough. You got a family? Had one. She waited. He didn't elaborate. Tala nodded like she understood. Because she did. After a while, she whispered, So do I. Gonna come looking? Not all of them. Her voice cracked. Not for the right reasons. They sat in that crackling silence. Then her voice again, small. What do you want from me? Silas raised his eyes. Want you to stay alive, he said. Rest, heal, then do what you choose. Choose, she echoed, like it was a foreign word. He nodded. Out here, most folks don't get that. I'm not most folks. They locked eyes across the firelight. Neither blinked. And in that look, longer than was proper, heavier than most men could carry, something unspoken passed between them. She broke it first. I'll stay, for now. He gave no smile. Just said, Then you're under my roof, and no one touches what's under my roof. And in the deep of that cabin, where blood and dust had long since dried on every beam, a line was drawn. Not with words, but with grit. Dawn didn't ask permission. It crept in slow through the cracks in the shutters, laying soft light across the floorboards like it didn't know it was interrupting something sacred. Tala stirred beneath the blanket. Her eyes blinked open. Slow, cautious. The cot was firm beneath her. Her shoulder ached, her ribs throbbed, but the pain had settled into something dull. Bearable. The warmth of the wool still covered her chest. She ran a hand over it, and for a moment she just lay there, unsure if the quiet around her was real or some cruel trick. Then she heard him. Silas. His boots moved slow across the porch just beyond the door. A bucket rattled. The scrape of the pump handle groaned into the morning hush. His voice came after, low, steady, talking to the horse like it was a partner instead of property. That voice, it didn't belong to a man who had wicked things in mind. Tala pushed herself up. Her breath hitched from the strain. The pain was still there, but her body responded this time. Stiff, but not broken. She caught sight of the repair on her dress. A leather lace had been looped through the tear, threaded with care, tied with a small wooden toggle. No stitching to peek, no prying fingers, just function, done with respect. That small act hit harder than the medicine. She exhaled slow. When she opened the door, the morning air wrapped around her shoulders like a blanket dipped in cold spring water. It woke every nerve she had. Silas turned at the sound. He didn't startle, just looked her way and gave a single nod, like a man who expected her to be strong enough to stand. You're up, he said. His voice hadn't changed, still gravel steady, still plain spoken. But there was something else there, something like quiet relief. I can walk, she said, though her knees told another story. She caught herself on the frame. He didn't rush, didn't reach for her, just said, Easy. The horse beside him flicked its ear, looking at her like it had seen this before. Just another stray blown in from trouble. Tala's eyes scanned the yard. No tents, no riders, no other boots in the dirt but his. You live alone, she said. Not a question. He nodded. 7 years now. She didn't need to ask why. She could feel the loss hanging in the stillness between them. Her shoulder flared again, sharp as a blade. She winced, pressing her fingers to the bandage. Sit down, he said, nodding toward the chair near the door. It was tucked in the shade, already turned to face the rising sun. I ain't helpless, she muttered. He didn't argue. Sittin' ain't surrender. She took the seat. After a moment, he came back with a tin plate, scrambled eggs, a strip of roasted rabbit, and a wedge of fry bread. It steamed in the cool morning like an offering. She stared. You cooked? You need strength, he said, like that was the only explanation necessary. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the first bite. It wasn't fancy food, but it was hot, and it was honest. Every chew grounded her a little more. By the time she finished, she wasn't shaking anymore. Her voice was quieter now, less guarded. Why'd you help me? Silas didn't look at her. Most wouldn't, she added. I ain't most. Tala studied him, looking for the edge, the lie. But his face was still, a man carved from grit, not games. He turned to look at her finally. What happened to your people? She hesitated, eyes narrowing. Some of them would trade me for a mule and a jug of whiskey. Silas didn't respond with shock. Just nodded once, like he'd seen men sell worse for less. You got family? She asked. His jaw set. That told her enough. My wife, my son. Fever took 'em, he said, voice flat. The silence that followed was the kind you didn't break with comfort. Tala didn't try. He looked toward her shoulder. I need to check the wound. She tensed. Silas didn't move. You can say no, he added, calm. You don't owe me a damn thing. Her throat worked. The words came out like sand. Do it, but slow. He crouched beside her. His fingers were cautious, not just in touch, but in intent. He didn't watch the wound. He watched her face, checking, waiting. The bandage came off clean. The scrape looked red but not angry. He applied a fresh one, tight but not rough. His hand brushed her collarbone by accident. Tala sucked in a breath. Silas stood up fast. You're safe here. This time she believed him. She watched as he moved back to the trough. His movements careful, economical, like everything he did had been stripped of excess over time. I want to earn my keep, she said suddenly. He looked over, one brow raised. In your house, on your land. I ain't some dead weight. No one said you were. I still need to prove it. He thought a moment, then nodded. When you can walk without swaying, you'll help. Until then, you rest. Tala leaned back, the weight of his coat still on her shoulders, the sun warming her cheek. She didn't say it, but something inside her whispered, I'll stay. Not because I have to, but because I want to. The moon rose slow, casting silver dust over the porch rail and bleeding through the chinks in the cabin wall. Inside, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels thick in the chest, like even the fire knows better than to crackle too loud. Tala stirred again. She'd slept some after supper. Not deep, not long. Just enough to reset the pain and remind her she was still alive. Her shoulder still throbbed, her thigh ached, but her breath didn't catch from fear anymore. That was new. She sat up slow. The cabin was still. Tools lined up like soldiers on the shelf. One plate, one cup. Everything had its place, like chaos had no right stepping over that threshold. She let her eyes travel to the man sitting just outside the edge of the light. Silas Kane. He was there in the chair, just as before. Hat on his knee, rifle leaning against the wall, back straight but not tense. He wasn't watching her, not exactly. Just being still in that way only men who've seen too much can be. She spoke first. You don't sleep much, do you? No reason to, he answered. Tala looked toward the table. A cup of water sat waiting. Her throat was dry as cotton. She swung her legs over the edge of the cot and winced. She reached for the cup, but stopped halfway, wary of what came next. Silas didn't move. "You can take it," he said. "I ain't gonna come near you." Something in her chest loosened. She picked it up, hands still trembling, and took a sip. The water was cool, clean. She hadn't realized how badly she needed it. "Why?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Why go to all this trouble?" Silas didn't look away from the fire. "Because you were caught in my trap. Doesn't feel right leaving something to die that didn't choose to be hunted." Tala stared at him. "Most men don't think that way." "I ain't most men," he said again, plain as fence-post truth. She gave a soft huff, half scoff, half something else. "You keep saying that." He looked at her then. "Because it keeps being true." The firelight caught the hard lines of his face, weathered, drawn, but not cruel. He wasn't young anymore, but whatever had aged him, it hadn't rotted his core. She looked down, thumb rubbing the rim of the tin cup. "Most places I've been, kindness came with a price, a collar, a chain." Silas shook his head. "You're under my roof, not under my boot." The words landed somewhere between disbelief and warmth in her chest. A long silence followed. But it didn't feel sharp, just heavy, like two folks sitting on opposite sides of a canyon, not yelling across, but listening for echoes. Then her voice again, low and slow. "I'll leave when I can walk steady." "You'll leave when you choose to," he corrected. "That's different." She met his eyes, really met them this time. "You say that like it's easy." "It ain't," he said, "but it's yours to say." Another silence, a deeper one. Then Tala looked down at the floor beside the cot. "You slept there?" she asked. He nodded. "Didn't want you thinking I'd try something. Figured it'd be hard enough just being in a room with a stranger." Her throat tightened. She couldn't remember the last time a man had thought about her fear before his own comfort. She let the truth settle in her gut like warm bread. "Thank you," she whispered. Silas just gave her that same quiet nod. She leaned back slowly, shoulder bracing against the wall, and pulled the blanket up again. "You ever get tired of being alone?" she asked, not looking at him. "Every damn day," he said. "But some ghosts only stay quiet when there ain't other footsteps in the house." Tala closed her eyes. "You one of those ghosts?" she asked. "No," he said. "But you woke 'em." Her lips curled into the ghost of a smile. "I'll try not to spook 'em too bad." He chuckled. Just once, dry and low, like it had been years since anything earned the sound. "I doubt that," he said. Then he stood, stepped to the hearth, and threw on another log. The flames caught, light dancing over the wood beams and across Tala's face. He looked at her. "You're safe tonight. Nobody's coming. I'd know if they were." She nodded. And when she laid her head back down, she didn't flinch when the blanket shifted. Didn't brace for pain. Didn't fear the man by the fire. The sun hadn't quite crested the ridge, but already the light was slipping across the dirt like a slow whisper. It touched the doorframe first, then crept its way through the cabin window, laying a pale warmth on Tala's sleeping face. She blinked awake. The pain was still there, sharp in the shoulder, a dull throb in her ribs. But something else had changed. She didn't reach for the blanket like it was armor. Didn't brace herself for danger. Just breathed. She looked down. The dress, the same one torn in the snare, had been mended. Not with thread and needle, but with a thin leather thong, looped careful through the edges. A small wooden toggle kept the front closed. Crude, sure, but done with intent. He hadn't just covered her, he'd restored her. That act spoke louder than words. She touched the repair and felt her throat tighten. Outside, Silas moved through the yard, sleeves rolled, pouring feed into a tin pan for the sorrel in the corral. He moved the way he always did, deliberate, grounded. He didn't know she was watching. Or maybe he did. And just let her. Tala stood slowly, testing the strength in her legs. The pain tugged at her with every shift of weight. But she stayed up, walked to the doorway, let the morning air hit her face. Silas turned, caught sight of her. He didn't smile, he rarely did, but he gave a nod. "You're moving better." "I woke up dressed," she said, one brow raised. He kept his voice level. "Your dress was torn. I fixed it." She looked down again at the toggle. Her fingers brushed it. "I noticed." No sarcasm, no suspicion, just quiet truth between them. He pointed toward the bench outside. "Sit. Got breakfast going. If you're staying upright, you'll need it." She eased herself down, one hand bracing her good side. The bench creaked under her weight. Silas came back a minute later with a tin plate, more of the rabbit from yesterday, a bit of fried bread, and hot beans laced with chili powder. She stared at it for a long second. Not because she doubted it, but because she wasn't used to it. Food without threat. She ate slow, careful. Every bite put something back in her bones. Halfway through, she spoke. "Why?" she asked, eyes still on the plate. "Why what? Why are you doing all this? You could have left me in that net. You didn't. You could have walked away 10 different times." Silas leaned back against the post, arms folded. "My wife, Abigail. My boy, Samuel. They died. Fever took 'em fast. Real fast." Tala looked up. He wasn't trying to impress her with the story. Wasn't looking for sympathy. He said it like he was brushing dust off the truth. "I lived in town after that, for a time. Couldn't stand the sound of pity in people's voices. Couldn't stand the way they looked at me like I was hollow inside." "So you came out here?" "Yep. Built this place myself. Figured if the world was gonna take from me, I'd take something back. Silence, land, distance. And now?" He met her eyes. "Now I got a person sitting on my porch asking me why I didn't let her die. That's different." Tala held his gaze. Her voice was soft, but not fragile. "I ain't your wife." "No, and I ain't asking you to be." She took another bite, chewing slower this time. Then, "I can still work. I can't run yet, but I'm not dead weight." "I never said you were." She shook her head. "But I feel like I am. That's the worst part." Silas looked out toward the line of hills. "I know that feeling," he said. "And I know it don't go away by someone telling you it's wrong. It goes away by proving it wrong." She nodded. She understood that better than most. "Let me help," she said. "When I can walk steady, let me carry part of the load." Silas didn't argue, just answered plain. "All right. When you don't sway like a willow in the wind, I'll put a tool in your hand." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "I've got calluses," she muttered. "We'll see if they're worth anything." The wind picked up then. Dry. Clean. It swept across the porch and tugged at the hair that had slipped loose from her braid. She looked at Silas again. Really looked at him. The way his hands stayed loose, not clenched. The way he stood with his body angled away from her, not toward. The way he spoke like every word cost him something. But he paid it anyway. "You're a strange man, Silas Kane. Better than a cruel one." They sat in silence after that. But it wasn't the same silence from before. This one had room in it. Room enough for healing. Room enough for what might come next. The heat settled over the land like a warning. It was mid-morning, but the sky had that stillness to it. Too quiet, too clear. No hawks wheeled above, no coyotes called from the canyon ridge. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Tala stepped outside the cabin, wrapped in her repaired dress, the blanket folded over her shoulders like a shawl. Her movements were steadier today. Not strong yet, but stronger. She didn't sway when she stood, didn't flinch at shadows. Silas stood a few feet away, splitting firewood. Each swing of the axe landed with the same sharp rhythm. Clean, controlled, as if he'd cut more than timber in his time. She watched in silence for a while before speaking. "I want to try walking out to the fence." Silas didn't stop the axe, didn't look at her right away. "You sure you're ready?" "I'm not sure of anything," she said, "but I'm done sitting still." That got a small nod from him. He stepped aside and let her pass without offering a hand. That, too, was a kind of respect. She took her first step into the yard, bare feet touching the hot, cracked dirt. Her leg ached, but it held. The second step came easier. Then a third. She made it 5 paces before the fire lit behind her knee. She stumbled. Before her body could fall, Silas was there, an arm under her elbow, steady, patient, not grabbing, just bracing. Tala froze, her muscles tensed, breath caught, mind flashing through 100 other hands that hadn't been kind. But Silas didn't tighten his grip. He held her up, waited until she regained her balance, then let go. Just like that. She exhaled, trembling, but still standing. "Don't rush it," he said, voice calm. "Your body's still remembering how to carry you." "I can't afford to forget," she muttered. "Not again." Their eyes met. He understood. The same way a man does who's had the ground stolen from beneath him too many times. Then something changed. Silas's shoulders tensed. His head turned west. Tala followed his gaze. There, on the far horizon, a rising smudge of dust. Riders. 2. The sound came next. Distant hooves on hardpan. Silas didn't panic. He didn't even curse. He just stared, calculating. He turned toward Tala. "Go back inside." "No. It ain't a request." She stood firm. "I'm not hiding like some wounded thing. I'll stand behind you, but I'll stand." His jaw clenched. A storm passed through his eyes. But he didn't argue. "All right," he said. "But close behind me. If they try anything, you run." "I don't run from scavengers," she said. "Not anymore." They stepped up to the edge of the yard together. Silas rested his hand on the rifle, leaning near the porch. The sun caught the metal. His stance shifted. Not aggressive, but prepared. A man ready to hold his line. The riders closed in. Tala saw them now. One was thin, wiry, with a nervous twitch in his mouth. The other was broad through the chest, scarred across the jaw, ugly in a way that didn't just happen by accident. They pulled up near the broken fence line, eyes raking across the cabin, the woman beside it, the man guarding the threshold. "Well, I'll be," the big one drawled. "Looks like someone done caught himself something purty." Silas didn't blink. "You're on my land, and you're keeping what ain't yours. She ain't yours either." The thin man leaned on the horn of his saddle. "She ran from her people. Her daddy sent us." "She didn't mention a daddy," Silas said, voice flat. "Just men who'd sell her like beef on the hoof." Tala stepped out from behind him then, just enough to be seen. Her eyes locked with the one who'd spoken. "I don't belong to Taza anymore," she said. "Not to him, not to you." The big one snarled. "You think you get to choose now?" Silas lifted the rifle, slow, steady, not pointed. Not yet. She does, he said, and I'll stand for that choice. The air snapped tight between them. No one moved. The thin one shifted in his saddle. The scarred man stared at Silas a beat too long, then spat in the dirt. Fool's gonna get himself shot over a stray. Try me, Silas said. Just once. Something in his voice made both men freeze. It wasn't a threat. It was a sentence. The big man backed his horse up with a scowl. You ain't seen the last of us? Maybe not, Silas replied, but you'll regret the next time more than this one. They turned and rode off, dust trailing behind them like a curse. Tala's knees weakened again, but this time it wasn't pain. It was the aftershock of standing firm. Silas lowered the rifle, but didn't speak. She looked at him. Really looked. You stepped in front of them. You were already behind me, he said. Didn't seem right not to finish the job. A long silence followed. Then Tala whispered. You just drew a line in the dirt. Silas looked back at the fence, the horizon, the men disappearing into the distance. Yeah, he said, and now they know where it is. They didn't speak much the next day. Tala spent the morning tending the hens, feeding them with one hand while the other clutched her healing ribs. She moved slow but deliberate, no longer a shadow afraid of the light. Silas repaired the fence, each hammer strike sounding like a heartbeat drawn in wood. Still, the dust hadn't settled. Not in their bones. By dusk, the wind came back. This time it carried something new. Smoke. Silas sniffed the air and stood from the fence post. He turned toward the hills. That's not from a cook fire, he muttered. Tala came to stand beside him, her eyes narrowing at the wisp curling above the ridge. She didn't ask if it was Taza. She already knew. That night, they kept a lamp burning low and the rifle loaded near the door. Silas didn't sleep. Not that he did much before. But now his body stayed rigid, like the weight of old instincts had settled on his shoulders again. Tala, wrapped in one of the wool blankets, stared at the ceiling from her cot. You ever kill a man? Silas didn't look at her. More than one. Did it feel like justice? He leaned back against the doorframe. At the time? No. Felt like gravel in my stomach. Later, just felt quiet. She turned her face toward the flame. My father, she said softly, was once a scout for the cavalry. He led them through the pass. Thought if he cooperated, they'd leave our people alone. Instead, they used him. Then they killed my brother. Silas didn't interrupt. So I ran, she whispered. From the grief. From him. From all of it. But the desert don't forget. He took that in. A long pause stretched between them, thick with the ghosts of both their pasts. I ain't your judge, he said finally. You made it this far. That's a damn sight braver than most, her voice cracked. But not far enough. By morning there were hoofprints near the north edge of the property. Fresh. Silas crouched low, fingertips brushing the disturbed dirt. He stood and called to her. We got one night, maybe two. They're watching. Will they come back with more? Probably. Men like that don't take kindly to being told no. Tala stood tall beside the corral. The wind tugged at her hair. Then we make it harder to say yes. They spent the day preparing. Silas taught her how to hold the rifle, how to brace her stance. Tala's hands shook the first time she aimed, but by evening the nerves gave way to something steel-boned. She wasn't shooting for practice. She was aiming to survive. They rigged wire across the back trail, hid a scatter of broken glass in the brush by the cabin. Every trap was small, quiet, meant to slow, not stop, just enough to give them ground. By nightfall, Silas looked out across the land and muttered, "Still ain't enough." Tala turned to him. "You know they're not here just for me." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. That night, the storm finally came. Not rain, but thunder without water. A dry rage, the kind that rattles window panes and sets coyotes to howling. Tala sat by the fire, cleaning the rifle with careful fingers. Silas watched her from the shadows. "You sure you're ready?" "I'm not a child," she said. "And I'm not the same woman who crawled into your barn." His voice was hoarse. "Didn't say you were." She looked at him then. Really looked. Not just at the man who gave her food or patched her wounds. She saw the weight in his eyes. The old hurt he never named. "You're carrying something too," she said, "and it's heavier than that rifle." He shifted, jaw tight. "I once did something I thought would save a man's life. Turned out it damned his whole family instead." Tala's breath caught. "And you think this makes it right?" "No," Silas said. "But maybe it makes me less wrong." The wind blew harder. Lanterns flickered. Tala walked to the doorway and looked out over the land, the hills now swallowed by night. "When they come," she said, "don't try to protect me like I'm broken." Silas nodded. "Then stand beside me, not behind." They didn't say good night. Out here, in this land of grit and ghosts, the night held no promises. Only silence, and the blood still owed. The first shot didn't come at dawn. It came before, in that still hour when even coyotes hush, and the fire's nothing but red breath in a dying stove. Silas was already awake, sitting with the rifle across his knees, boots on, jaw tight. Tala was by the window when the glass shattered. She didn't scream. She ducked low, grabbed the second rifle from behind the table, and crawled toward the far wall like she'd done it before. Maybe she had, in another life, one where girls were hunted instead of raised. "3 riders," Silas said, calm like a farmer naming clouds. "One's Taza, the other 2, don't matter. They ain't talking." Tala glanced toward the front door. "They expecting you to come out?" He didn't smile. "They're expecting someone to die. Doesn't matter who." Another shot rang out, hit the water barrel out front. Splinters flew. Silas moved fast, opened the floor hatch where he'd stashed a box of cartridges. Tala reloaded with shaking hands, but her eyes were sharp, steady now. No fear, only resolve. A kind carved into people like them, not born. "You still sure?" he asked. She didn't answer, just nodded once. That was enough. They held out longer than expected. Silas circled out the back while Tala laid down covering fire. Her shots weren't clean, but they were smart, forced the men behind the rocks to think twice. One came too close to the barn. He didn't make it back. Silas dropped him clean with 1 round to the chest, but the cost came swift. Taza flanked the ridge and lobbed a lantern onto the barn roof. It caught fast. Flames crawled like serpents along dry timber. The horses screamed, wild with panic. Tala ran out. Instinct, not plan, trying to cut them loose. And that's when the bullet caught her shoulder. She fell hard in the dirt. "Tala!" Silas's voice cracked like a whip. He ran to her, dragging her back behind the cabin wall as rounds peppered the logs. Blood soaked through her sleeve. She gritted her teeth. "Keep fighting. Don't waste it." "You're not dying out here," he growled. "Then help me stand." He did. And together, bloodied and burnt, they made their last stand behind that scorched porch. But then, a miracle. The wind shifted. Ash from the burning barn blew straight into the bandits' eyes, and for a brief moment, one heartbeat of chaos, Silas saw his chance. He charged, took the ridge. Taza raised his pistol too slow. Silas tackled him hard to the ground, and they wrestled in the dirt like wolves in a death struggle. Fists, elbows, curses in two tongues. The man was strong, angry, and vicious. But Silas had something else. A debt that still needed paying. He broke Taza's grip and slammed his fist into the side of his jaw. Once, twice. Then he stopped, chest heaving, rage cooling into something darker. Taza coughed blood and sneered. "She's Apache. You think she won't turn on you too?" Silas stood, rifle now in hand. "I'm not here for her tribe," he said. "I'm here for her." And he let Taza crawl away, not as mercy, as a message. When the dust settled, the barn was gone. One horse saved, the others lost. Tala's wound was deep, but not deadly. Silas sewed it with hands that once carved wood instead of skin. She didn't flinch. Outside, the land looked different, like it had aged with them, like it had watched. "You should have killed him," Tala said as he cleaned the needle. "I did," Silas replied. "Just didn't bury him." They sat in silence, lit by firelight and a sky bruised by smoke. Then Tala whispered, "Why do you care?" Silas didn't answer at first. He looked towards the burnt fence, the shattered corral, the broken line between past and present. "Because once," he said, "I didn't, and someone paid for it." Tala's gaze softened, though her body remained guarded. "You think you can undo that?" "No," he said quietly, "but I can build something better where it used to be." She closed her eyes, breathed deep, and for the first time, leaned into him. Just a little. Just enough. Outside, ash fell like snow across dry hollow. Inside, the fire burned steady. And for a moment, they believed maybe the worst had already come and gone. But the past wasn't done yet. It never is. The morning after the fire was quiet. Not peaceful. Just quiet, like the land itself was catching its breath. Tala sat outside with her arm in a sling, the skin of her shoulder raw and stitched. Her eyes followed the line of smoke that still drifted from the blackened bones of the barn. She hadn't cried. Not when the bullet hit. Not when the horses screamed. Not even when she saw the last of her father's saddle burning in the blaze. But now, as ash clung to the fence rails and the wind ran low, her eyes stung. Not from smoke, from memory. Silas came up beside her holding a tin cup. "Hot coffee. Strong enough to stand a spoon upright." She took it with her good hand. "Doesn't matter. I still can't taste anything." He sat on the step beside her. Neither said much. After a long while, Tala broke the silence. "Why'd you let him live?" Silas didn't answer right away. He rubbed the worn brim of his hat between calloused fingers. "Because killing a man like that don't change nothing. Doesn't bring back what's lost. Doesn't patch what's broken." She glanced at him. "But it might have ended it." Silas looked toward the horizon. "No. That kind of hate don't end with one man." Later, while she rested, Silas rummaged through a rusted tin box in the back of the cabin. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside were old photographs, a watch that hadn't ticked since the winter of '68, and at the bottom, creased, smudged, nearly forgotten, was a letter, addressed not to Tala, but to her father, Eli. Silas turned it over in his hand, thumb tracing the seal. He'd written it after the war, after he rode as a scout for a man named Gant, after a decision that cost 12 Apache lives. Lives Silas thought he was saving. But he never sent it. Because back then, admitting guilt meant weakness. Now, it felt like cowardice. That night, he gave her the letter. Tala held it for a long time before opening it. Her fingers trembled slightly, worn from pain, fatigue, and the unfamiliar weight of being seen. She read it in silence. No tears, just slow, heavy breaths. When she finished, she folded the page and placed it back on the table. "You knew who I was from the start." Silas didn't flinch. "Didn't take long to put it together. And still you helped me." "I didn't help you," he said. "Not at first. At first I was trying to make up for something I couldn't name. And now?" He looked her in the eyes. "Now I just want to keep you alive." The next day, they buried the horse bones out back. Tala painted a symbol in the dirt, a pattern her mother once taught her. A mark to guide spirits home. Silas watched from the porch, arms crossed, heart tight. "Never figured myself for someone who'd ask forgiveness." Tala didn't look up. "Maybe it ain't about asking?" "What then?" "It's about what you do with what's left." That evening, a rider approached, dust-covered, alone. Silas reached for his rifle but didn't raise it. Something in the rider's posture didn't speak of violence, just weariness. The man dismounted and pulled something from his saddlebag. A telegram. "Name's Roy Cutter. Came from Pecos Basin. You Silas Langston?" "Used to be," Silas muttered. Cutter handed him the paper. "Message from a marshal in Red Bluff. Said you'd understand." Silas unfolded the paper. Tala watched him read, his face going pale beneath the dirt and stubble. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the words like they were fire in his hands. Finally he spoke. "Corbin Gant. He's coming." Tala stiffened. "You said he died." "I thought he had." She stepped forward. "And now?" Silas met her gaze. "Now we finish this." The wind picked up again, but this time it didn't smell like fire. It smelled like reckoning. And somewhere deep in the folds of dusk, the ground itself seemed to murmur. The past always finds a way home. They waited for Gant in silence. Tala finished packing the saddlebag with what little they had left. Dried meat, spare rounds, a pouch of healing herbs she didn't believe in anymore. Her sling was gone, but the wound still ached in the cold. Silas sat at the edge of the porch, rifle across his lap, a cigarette burning slow in the corner of his mouth. He hadn't shaved in days. Maybe that was the point. Some men wore armor, others wore regret. "Should have left when we had the chance," she muttered. Silas shook his head. "You don't run from ghosts. You face them, or they follow you forever." The sun crept up behind the hills like it was nervous, and in that pale light, 3 riders appeared. Gant rode in the center, tall, deliberate, wearing a coat too fine for a man that dirty. His horse bled black dust from every hoofprint. Flanking him were 2 others, hired hands, no names, just muscle with badges that didn't mean law. Tala's grip tightened on the bough she'd carved from an old fence post. Silas stood. His voice was even. "Corbin." Gant stopped just short of the burnt barn ruins. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, smile thin as wire. "Still know how to greet a guest?" "You're no guest." Gant dismounted slowly. "You never sent that letter, you know. I found it in your old pack when they dragged you out of that canyon. Meant for a dead Apache, wasn't it?" Silas didn't blink. "That man was better than both of us." Gant scoffed. "He was a scout. Like you, like me. Don't rewrite the past just 'cause you grew a conscience." Silas stepped down from the porch. Dust kicked up around his boots. "She's not part of this." Gant's gaze drifted to Tala. "She's exactly part of this. Blood always is. Tala's voice cut through, calm, controlled. If you came for revenge, it's already burned. Nothing left here but ash. Gant turned his eyes back to Silas. Then let's finish what was started. Silas dropped the rifle. Not in surrender, in invitation. No bullets this time, just hands. Gant laughed. You're old, Langston. And you're a coward hiding behind a badge and 2 scared boys. The taunt worked. Gant removed his coat, stepped forward. The air was thin with tension, coiled like a rattlesnake held at the neck. They met in the clearing. No ceremony, just bone on bone, fists like hammers, curses dug up from old wounds. Dust flew, blood splattered. Tala didn't intervene. She watched, jaw clenched, shoulders braced, because she knew this fight wasn't about strength. It was about atonement. Silas went down once, twice, but each time he rose, tenacious, bleeding, breath ragged, until the 3rd time, when he didn't rise fast. Gant moved to finish it. But that's when Tala stepped forward. Not with the bow, with the letter. She threw it at Gant's feet. "This is who you really are," she said. "Not a lawman, not a leader, just a man who killed to cover guilt." Gant looked at the folded paper like it was a loaded pistol. Silas rose behind him, and this time he didn't miss. One punch to the throat, one to the gut, and Gant collapsed. Not dead, but defeated. The deputies didn't fight. They rode off without a word, like dust scattering before rain. By sundown, it was over. Gant was tied to the last post of the old corral, waiting for the marshal's wagon. Silas's knuckles were torn. Tala's hands shook as she poured water into a cracked cup. She passed it to him. "You didn't have to spare him," she whispered. "I know." "Then why?" Silas stared out at the horizon. "Because justice ain't always a bullet." Tala sat beside him. They watched the last rays stretch across the land like a goodbye. He finally said, "I was wrong about a lot of things, about peace, about punishment, but mostly I was wrong thinking redemption was earned alone." She placed her hand on his. Rough skin met scarred fingers. Equal. Maybe it's built like a home. Silas looked at her, weary, steadfast, softened, and for the first time in years he smiled, not because the pain was gone, but because someone else shared it. That night they didn't say much, just sat beneath a sky full of stars, not waiting anymore, just being. And in the end, maybe that's all the West ever asked of those who survived it. Not to forget, not to fix, but to stand with someone after the fire, after everything. If you had one letter to send, but never did, who was it for? This ends the story. But some ghosts ride forever.